retrospectively.
Yeah, no worries.
How shall I introduce you when I do that? Just
Chief Creative Officer at Cook.
Yeah, fine. Okay. You haven't got sort of like side hustles or anything, or books you've written, or no.
Sadly not for my sins. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Brill. So my first question I'll ask you. So I just check two things. One thing is I'll ask you straight away, what does extraordinary leadership mean to you?
Okay.
And then the other thing is, have you got a household item that
I have.
Have you? Oh,
I've done it. Yeah.
Oh my
I
God,
have.
you're literally brownie marks. Excellent.
And it's not just because it happens to be a thing that's on my desk in my line of sight as I was looking around madly. So what on earth can I pick?
Do you know, most of the people I interview are so like creative. They're like, oh, this pen, or like my old glasses. You know, like all of that. Great. Well, let's dive in, James.
Cool.
We'll see how we go. Great. So, James, it's really lovely to have you here on the show. How are you today, and where are you?
I am good. I'm sat at home in what is currently sunny Kent, which is a novel moment given the deluge we've been suffering for however many weeks it is.
Oh, I know. And actually, I just have to say your background is lush. We've already discussed this once before, but you do have a very beautiful Zoom room background. So
straight back at you.
Yeah, thanks.
We've already swapped paint colours, haven't we? So there you go.
For sure.
And colour-coordinated books on shelves and all that stuff, yeah.
We really have. But James, let's kick off. What does extraordinary leadership mean to you?
So I have a little issue with the extra because I know what you're getting at. But it immediately does put a little bit of I'm not extraordinary. How on earth can I talk about extraordinary leadership? Bit of pressure on there. And it is, I guess, so it's really about ordinary leadership, which I think is where you're coming from. And we kind of spoke a bit about this before, this lovely idea from the School of Life around that, ordinary isn't a name for failure, but it contains the best of life. And so what does ordinary leadership mean? And in ordinary leadership is the best of life. So actually, how do we become more ordinary? What does that actually mean? Just to lead, just to turn up and lead and be a leader. And I think for me, there's three parts to it. There's that sense in which and this is very much with a Cook concept, Cook kind of hat on. You're leading our values at Cook, which is definitely the kind of the behaviours on which the business and the culture is built. I think you're leading your relationships with everybody else within Cook, whether that's on a one-to-one or a team or group basis. And then you're leading yourself, because there's that, that classic thing, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. And so unless you're in a good place yourself as a leader, you're not going to be leading other people in a good way. So the very ordinary, mundane, day-to-day leadership is trying to turn up and do those three things, I guess.
I'm so glad you've put it like that, because you're right. That is exactly what this show is about. And the extraordinary is provocative, because I'm actually allergic to that superlative of like, you got to be amazing. And oh my gosh, you're on fire. And, you hear these things like, oh, she's pocket rocket, and all these things about people being amazing at this and that. And it's just, it can be a really big burden in your already heavy rucksack of things in life to then have to smash this too. So that's why it's the ordinary with the capital O, 100%. And it's the small extras, isn't it? But you just touched on, so at Cook, lead with values, lead with your relationships, and lead with thinking about yourself. We talk a lot about values in the learning development space and in business, and how values are a really important part of, you've got to know what they are to kind of really drive it through. What's your view on this? How do people translate a kind of workshop of figuring out what their values are, being able to articulate it? First of all, it's like, that's quite hard. Like Simon Sinek, find your why. Like, okay, great. I now know my why, but then your why can change. How can we be adaptable with that change? And how can we make sure that we're implementing it in our everyday? So kind of bringing it from the workshop to the life to life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think there's two maybe slightly different things that may be purely semantic or something slightly deeper, because there is that, if you like, the Simon Sinek why purpose side of things, like which I would see as more as well, why am I doing this thing? Where am I going to? Where am I wanting to head? And I think that's an interesting thing as well that we might want to come back to. Just if you're going to accept in any way the idea that you're a leader, then where are you leading to? Is just an interesting question. So there's that, if you like, purposeful side of things, but then there is the values based bit of it. So I would say that's probably more of the how. So why you're going there is one thing. How are you going to get there is the kind of behaviors you're going to bring into the workplace every day to enable that journey. So again, with a cook hat on, we have values, which we call our essential ingredients. Interestingly, we didn't articulate them until we've been going, a dozen years, I think. So we've survived more than a decade without articulating values, and then we went through a process of doing that.
What's that given you? Can I just ask on that? Like, so you managed without for a decade, and then you managed to articulate it. How has that done anything? Has that changed anything? What's that done in just being able to articulate it?
So I think without articulating them, we would not have be where we are today. So that's kind of about halfway through Cook's life. So because we've been around 27 years now, but up until that point, we were still just about small enough that you knew everybody. At least you recognized everybody. You could meet most new people who started at the business. The values in terms of behaviors and beliefs was something that could kind of flow out by osmosis, as it were, and you could be pretty confident everybody would be touched by it just from that personal kind of relationship level. But then you get to a certain size where you suddenly wake up and go, whoa, there's suddenly people all over the place that I've never met, that we've never even interviewed, that I've got no idea what they're like. So how on earth do we reach those people with a sense of what the expectation is in terms of behavior when you come to cook? So it was a growth kind of a growth challenge, and then figuring out how we articulate them was a process that took about 18 months. We did a lot of we got input from everybody. We started out with a list of about 50 things and big long paragraphs, and ended up with a list of 5 and a kind of sentence for each one, which was nice. But that point was probably genuinely a kind of a springboard to then the next phase of growth for Cook. We'd done the kind of the early big sexy, here's a great new business, fast growing, We'd then been through the big challenge, the kind of the near death experience of the credit crunch.
Wow.
And come out the other side, and having then our values, our essential ingredients articulated, was definitely the springboard to what proved to be kind of the next phase of kind of growth for the business.
Also sounds a bit like that those essential ingredients, being able to articulate those values, they're almost like a glue of identity for a tribe, aren't they? I mean, with businesses, they are sociological gatherings. And when people have got a common language, it's like, actually, when things are tough, we know who and what we belong to. I guess without it, it's going through difficulty. It's what are we holding on to? As you say, where are we leading to? How are we leading there?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's the unspoken stuff. So it is that sense of, this is how stuff gets done around here.
Yeah.
And it's the things everybody recognizes as well. So when we came up with the values and articulated them, we kind of felt we probably got it right, because everybody just kind of nodded and went, oh yeah. It wasn't like, oh wow, there's this incredible sexy thing. It was like, oh yeah, that's what we do around here. That's good. Yeah, which is good. But then with that kind of then the leadership frame on that, though, was then, a kind of 3 or 4 years later, thinking more intentionally about, so how do we want people to lead at Cook, was then putting it explicitly through that same values framework. So we have our essential ingredients, our 5 values of kind of be remarkable, care, have fun, be part of our family, and Churchill's pig. And then it's like, okay, so what do those mean when we're talking about leadership? And so then we have, our leadership framework is essential ingredients for leadership. Look, I've got it here. I'm going to show you the little book. There you go. So that is just, so so how do we interpret those values when we're thinking about our leadership and what we do? How do those show up for us in a leadership context, as well as just in the day-to-day context of doing our work? So making sure there's that real consistency through, we're not saying to everybody behave like this over here and then lead like this different way over here. We're trying to keep that very, very consistent and clear perspective of how we do things.
So before we started recording, we touched on something that I'd love to bring into this space about my observation sometimes is that when we're having conversations like this in the kind of creative spaces and values and leadership spaces, it's often beautiful concepts about values, but what does that have to do with the bottom line? Because there is this whole thing about profit and actually making money, and sometimes the consultancy spaces where bring in the strategists to do that, they're almost, I want to integrate them together so much more because they're so married, but I see them as being quite split. Even budgets are split to strategy and then development, and they seem to be kind of separate spaces, which I always find quite sad. And maybe there's something to change there. But where do you see these conversations around what is good leadership, values, why it's important, and profit? How are they connected? How are they matched?
So a lot of it depends on where you start, where you begin, and again for us at Cook, again going back kind of 15 years maybe, and this is a little bit back into speaking to the purpose question and why we're doing what we're doing, and through that conversation, we kind of got down to this idea that ultimately, what we're all about, what we really care about, and why we're turning up every day is to nourish relationships. And this idea that actually human flourishing is all about connection and relationship and being together and belonging. That's what makes us who we are. It's those connections, it's that basic human need to feel in relationship with other people. And that came through kind of uncovering this wonderful kind of study called the Harvard Grant Study, which has followed generations of people through from 1939. There's still a handful left, I think, and just ask them every year about what is their life like, how are they thriving, flourishing, what problems are they having. And the conclusion it came to over all those decades was it's all about relationships, that your sense of fulfillment and happiness across a lifetime just depends on your relationships with others. And if that's the case kind of for us as people, then surely that's the case for us in an organization or a business, because all that is really a bunch of people getting together to do something together that they couldn't do alone. That's all it is. It's a bunch of people. So that's kind of relationships as the foundational point. And then you're building out from that in the sense of, well, if we really believe it's all about relationships and about how do we thrive in relationships with other people, then the more we can invest in that, the more we can turn up to work with that in mind in the context of what we're trying to achieve together, then that's surely going to mean we succeed. And where success is thriving relationships and a profitable business, not a profitable business and shit relationships. The two have got to go hand in hand. Otherwise, actually, why we're turning up for work just doesn't make sense, and we're kind of failing in our purpose and our mission. So the relationship we see is intertwined. You can't do one without the other.
It's quite countercultural to the Western, history we've got, which is to pioneer, to take over, to conquer. Like that's in our sort of DNA in the West, isn't it? To take land, to take over business, to increase, to get more. So in business, I think that's a big paradigm that's kind of knocking around. And yet the approach that you've got at Cook and B Corp is actually, let's keep the people, the planet and the profit, but keep them all held together. It is quite counterintuitive to what we've all known, I think, in business. But how do you measure how people relationships are?
Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we have a necessarily good measure for that as a specific. I think again, if your hypothesis is that where the relationships are strong, the outcome will be good,
Yeah.
then in some sense you have to take that slightly holistic, big picture view and say, look, if we're creating what we see as good outcomes for people as individuals, where that might be, how we do kind of best companies to work for annual surveys. So we have the employee survey stuff. We have all the measures like turnover and longevity in terms of team and all that kind of stuff, and then we have the business measures, and so you have to try and take that as kind of a bundle of stuff that if you're going in the right direction, you're going to have more greens than reds on a kind of red, amber, green traffic light approach. And that is genuinely how we look at it. We have our set of very clear kind of milestones every year. That is what we're trying to achieve across the piece. So business kind of performance, environmental impact, social impact, people and culture. So we've got that really clear list. We red, amber, and green them every month. How are we doing? And at the end of the year, hopefully we've got more greens on there than reds and ambers. And that suggests that across the piece, as taken in that kind of holistic sense, yes, we're succeeding on our kind of conventional business measures, but we're also progressing and succeeding in terms of how we're seeking to move people forward and in terms of how we're seeking to have a positive impact on society and the planet.
It's so interesting. There's the Latin. So I mean, I don't know Latin well, but the word corporation, which is, as we understand business, is a Latin word, the corpse, the body, and what I find really interesting about business, which is really my paradigm's really shifted. I'm much more in B Corp mindset, in the past 5 years. Prior to that, I was quite kind of traditional and in the ways of how business works. But
yeah, and I'm interested. What prompted that change?
Ignorance. Prior was just an ignorance. I just didn't know there was another way, and you don't know what you don't know, and I didn't question enough. And then I think I had in my own life a complete 90-degree change of circumstances and my own career, and set up my own business. And I think it was, and I'm from a family business, and I'm the 6th generation, so I've really understood, a bit like you're saying with Cook, I already know this stuff, but I hadn't articulated it. But I've only seen business really close to hand, being led by men, and women don't work. And so I've always had that kind of, yes, the men know what they're doing and the women don't. And I had, even though I'd gone to great schools, and then I had this kind of, no one told me that. It's just, I didn't know what I believed that until it got exposed through another way. And just through, suddenly I had this 90-degree shift where I realized I needed to work properly. So I set up my own business. And it's been in this journey I've gone, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I've believed for so long without realizing it, that business is so creative. It's not for the elite few that are just naturally born being strategic. I laugh, okay, if any of my old mates from school are listening, apologies, but I laugh now that all the guys from my school who weren't very clever are really good, making loads of money in the city. And I was way cleverer than them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how have they gotten so clever? And I always equated business success with people being clever. And then I got confused. They weren't clever. Why are they so good? And yeah, so it's just been lots of learnings along the way and being exposed to my own front line of business on my own. Yeah. That's made me go, oh gosh, it's all about relationships. And I realized it was in my family business all along.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I can swap Latin with you now, though, because our favourite Latin is not corporation; it's actually company. So the roots of the word company are Latin roots, and it's two. There's com and there's panis, and so com meaning with, and panis meaning bread. So the roots of company, like before it was about profit, before it was about sales, before it was about business, was all about with bread, the people you would sit down with and share bread with. Is that basic human connection? And so, like, bringing back that idea of all we are when we have a company is a bunch of people coming together to do something, to share something, to be in relationship, to achieve an outcome that we couldn't do if we were trying to do it on ourselves.
And I love that. A language is so rich, isn't it? Because it just
Mm.
suddenly exposes you into a much deeper understanding of something. And when you're, I mean, I've worked in the non-profit for years, so that's when I shifted into the business space. But actually, whenever you've got a gathering of humans, whether it's a school, a prison, a FTSE 100, it doesn't really matter. An engineering firm, you are together, and the output, as you say, is what it is. When it's a shared outcome of like, how do we do whatever we've got on this year, this month, whatever. People are people. The narrative's different. That's what I always say. And so, good business is good parenting, is good marriage, is good friendship. It does really cross pollinate, doesn't it? Throughout.
Oh, completely,
Yeah.
completely. And I think that's definitely where if you like working on our leadership and definitely seeing leadership as a skill and seeing leadership as something that we all are inherently capable of.
Yeah.
Seeing, encountering that in a work context, if done well, inevitably kind of flows over into your home life, into your family, into your relationships. And I think there's no doubt, and maybe a bit of it is just aging and experience, but there's no doubt, I would say, since I've done more intentional work on leadership through Cook, I would say you'd have to take maybe a straw poll of my family. I've probably become, a better, just a better parent, a better husband, a better friend, because the two are so intimately connected. It's and so a quote we love and is in our essential ingredients little guidebook is a John Maxwell quote about leadership isn't about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It's about one life influencing another. And if that's all it is that's like just ordinary leadership is one life influencing another life, then that's what we do all day. We turn up and how are we influencing others for good or for ill? And if we step more intentionally into that space, and I think that's one of the interesting things we often come up against when we're talking about leadership to people who are kind of just taking steps into what we might call a quote unquote leadership role. It's that sense in which, but I'm not a leader. I didn't want to be a leader. Oh yeah, I wanted to get paid a bit more, but I never. Oh no, I didn't want to lead anybody. But it's just what we do. This is
funny. It's like you expect there's this sort of magical robe that appears. It's like, I am now a leader.
Yeah.
I am now arrived. It's like becoming a parent. I am now a parent, and I remember the first time I had a baby. And they left me on my own in the hospital that night with him. And I was holding him going, oh, wow, I'm a mum now. How do you hold these things? And then he pooed and I didn't know what to do. It's not like there was some cloak that told me what to do. You just figure it out, don't you? And it's the same with leadership. But it's funny. When you said earlier on about coming on to the podcast, it felt a little bit, I'm not an extraordinary leader. And a lot of my guests have said that it can feel quite like, I don't want to I don't build myself up.
Yeah.
But actually, it's very similar. It's like, no, I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying anyone is. It's just let's explore what it is. But we sometimes think that there is this, oh no, does someone think I'm extraordinary at leadership? Oh, help, I'm not. I'm human. Don't think that of me. And actually just derobing that myth and saying, if you're a leader, you're still a human, just like the people in your team. It's just a different level of responsibility about how you care for those around you, I would say.
I think that's absolutely true. And I mean, I'm trying to think where I heard this stat recently, and this is to do with becoming a manager, and I think there's that interesting tension between manager and leader. But I think somebody did some research recently, and it was, when people become a manager for the first time, some incredible number. I want to say the number that pops into my head is 82%. 82% of people say they have no training or introduction to what that means. And so there's a sense in which, you're suddenly given this, like you say, like your cloak, you're given this title with no idea of how to fulfill it or what that means, which is a kind of aberration, given that, people don't leave a company, they leave a manager type thing. So that is just shocking. But the same thing is true of leadership. So you have management as, if you like, we think of managing a task, leading people. So it's two slightly different. But again, then thinking of leadership, well, when you're given a position where perhaps leadership is more expected, then how are we going to help you frame that in your own mind? What tools are we giving you to help you work on it for yourself, to see where your strengths and weaknesses might lie naturally, to just develop and constantly be developing then. And that's, again, back to that values-based framework, and then how that follows people up in their journey through the organization, that it's always returning to the same things, just in slightly different ways. I'm working on my leadership today in the same way that somebody who's just become a first-time leader, team leader maybe, in our kitchen is working on theirs today. We're working on the same things. I've just probably been working on it a bit longer. Doesn't mean I'm any further along than them on some of it at all.
No, not at all. And you've got our own natural, some of us are just naturally more eloquent at certain human relational things than others,
Absolutely, yeah.
But the thing is, when I look at Cook, and I'm a big fan and a customer, by the way, which is fun.
Good.
I've worked a little bit with Cook, so I love working with people I buy from. What can come across from Cook is it's just so amazing, and the values are so good, and this is also strong. And by accident, it might come across as extraordinary, right? So I just wonder, without asking for dirty laundry, but just like, how do you guys deal with what kind of issues do you deal with in this space of leadership? Like, what problems have you come across personally, perhaps, that you could share that have been really hard, and how have you managed to come through them?
Gosh,
I'm really putting you on the spot.
No, I mean, let's be honest. Every day is like turning up and figuring out something that isn't going quite as well as it could be doing. And again, back to that, just that basic, we're just a bunch of people coming together. Whenever people are involved with other people, there's mess. Exactly. Right. There's some mess to sort out. It's not straightforward. So there's always things to do there. I think, again, just thinking about kind of big moments, there are certainly relating to business growth. Again, there was a moment going back, gosh, this must be 7 or 8 years or something, where again, we do the annual best companies survey, and we'd done really well. We'd achieved the dream of getting into the top 100 best companies to work for. We were top manufacturer. We were kind of second best retail, whatever, and so we'd got there. And then we were starting to see just through that survey, going from kind of the heights, just dipping off a bit. Mm-hmm. And again, we were growing quite fast. And I think the realization came was that for us as a growing business that really cared about culture, like the big difference wasn't going to be the people at the very top. They could sing and dance all about the great values and the great culture. And in all likelihood, it wasn't really focusing on the people who were coming in the door and joining us, but it was really important to focus on, if you like, the team leaders and the managers in the middle, who were day to day delivering, if you like, the experience of Cook for the majority of people. And it is that classic thing, people, as we said earlier, people don't leave a company, they leave a manager. So how do you make sure those people are really, enriching the culture, really buy into what we're seeking to do, are working on their leadership, are recognizing where they've got work to do. So we really that was actually where the essential ingredients for leadership came from. It was like, we need to articulate what it means to lead. We need to get those people together, do a kind of an annual event that gets all kind of leaders together, just to work on our leadership together and think about how we're delivering that for the business. So that was definitely a moment when it was like, if we don't address this, it's probably going to go off the rails. Yeah, for sure. So just making sure we don't neglect those people. I do think again, as a growing business, you've constantly got, and particularly for us with we make all our food, we have these big kitchens. So we've opened in the last, how many years? 5 years. We've gone from kind of having just one big kitchen to having 3 big kitchens in Sydney, born in Kent, and that means you've suddenly got 3 lots of leaders. You've got a load of recruitment to do.
Yeah.
You've got to somehow try and take a culture from just one place to three places, and accept it can't be exactly the same probably in all three, and where are you happy that it's different, and where do you need to maybe work on making it less different. How do you recruit people, how do you make, so that's been a huge challenge over the last, I would say, I mean, this was literally from the start of COVID. So the start of the pandemic, we just happened to open our second kitchen, and then through to last year we opened our third kitchen. But dealing with that has been a huge challenge. We haven't always got it right. We definitely, not all of our own making, clearly with COVID on, but being able to bring people in and give them the right kind of warm welcome to cook was somehow missing for good reasons through the pandemic. But we got out of the habit. So how do you make sure everybody gets a great induction? How do you make sure?
What's been your biggest learning in that? Like, if you reflect back on fast growth from 1 to 3 and trying to get the culture put through, what has been your biggest learning?
I think, again, a little bit is hard to disentangle the situation, because from kind of some of the challenges we faced, but I would say recruiting a lot of people, define a lot in whatever context you like. That might, for some people that might be 3, for some people might be 10. For us it was more like kind of going on for 100. But recruiting a lot of people in a short space of time is A, really hard, B, fraught with risk, C, you cannot almost put too much into it. You cannot focus on it too much.
Why not?
And but because again, I think this is back to that root. The root of any successful business is people. So if you're not being really robust around the people you recruit in the first place, it's very easy for things to start to unravel when you're trying to get a lot of people through. So how do you really give that the focus it deserves? How on earth do you reach a broader kind of group of people if you've already saturated the people near to where you are, type thing? So I think the big lesson was just, you cannot take recruitment too seriously. You've got to really focus on it. You've got to then think through that whole, horrible word, but onboarding process, and making sure it's as thorough and robust as possible.
Why is it a bad word, by the way? Why did you say that
onboarding?
Horrible word?
I don't know. It's just one of those horrible jargony words, isn't it? Onboarding.
I see. Yeah.
How you onboard so suddenly onboard becomes a verb. I'm not sure how you onboard anybody. I don't know. It's like weird, isn't it? So
it is. The reason I flag it up is because I think I have a real. I mean, we'll be singing from the same hymn sheet, it's just semantics, but I just see how many problems happen from poor onboarding. Call it mentoring instead. Yeah. It's people just get despair. And that's when imposter syndrome comes and people don't reach potential when they're just sort of left to their own devices. Yeah. But interesting the language.
Yeah, and I think there was some good research on this. I want to say it was Adam Grant, but doing quite a bit of research, like the time where you can make the biggest impact on anybody is often that first day. Oof. Like so if you think of it in that sense, like, so how somebody enters the building is going to colour their entire experience of what comes next, then what do you do? So how would that reorient how you think about it?
Yeah.
And I think there again, I might be misremembering this, but there's like the one question you should always kind of ask people apparently is so think of yourself, when have you been great at work? What has that felt like? What does that look like? What have you shown up and done in that context? What's been great? And now how can we help you bring that to work for us?
Wow.
And kind of, but so it's just, it does, like I say, it's remarkable when you think about it. It's like I can buy that. An amazing first day is going to just take you so far.
Totally. But then coming back round to this extraordinary thing, it is quite ordinary that we will all forget to kind of really care about people around us on the 2nd and 4th day and 12th day.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because we're all so busy. And that is an ordinary problem for leaders, isn't it? We're all so busy. that it's very easy. So my experience in the non-profit is that there's been, I've worked in churches a lot, and there's such a, again, it's semantics language, but such a kind of lovely language of over promising and then under delivering in relationship. And I think that's something that I'm always very cautious of, that yes, you want to make a first good impression. I love that. Adam Grant, maybe it was him who said that, but it's having that reverence, isn't it? On week 5, on week 10, it's like when someone dies, everyone rallies around at the beginning, but it's 6 months later, people are really lost. And it's having the discipline in relationship, and the discipline, you know, I think holding our values and holding good relationship is actually about discipline. Something that's not natural to me. And it's those small things, like having reminders to go, actually do right, do check in.
For sure.
As well.
I agree. And again, it's absolutely not my strong suit either, but I've definitely come to learn, often the hard way, that process is your friend in this place, 100%. And structure is your friend. And 100%. And again, we have a nice little kind of phrase, freedom in a framework, and that can cover all kinds of things, because you want to give people as much freedom as possible.
Yeah.
But everybody needs a framework within which to operate. Otherwise, it just goes off everywhere, and it's
totally.
like, you know. So what's the framework we're in? And definitely we've worked hard to make some of those frameworks easier for people. And again, on the leadership context, often that's stuff that sounds quite mundane and almost structural, bureaucratic, but it's so important. It's just like, what's your meeting with them? How often are you having one-to-ones? You know, are you having one-to-ones? Has everybody got their clear goals and KPIs and blah blah? You know, does everybody understand how they fit back? What's your team gathering schedule? You know, so getting that structure right gives you a chance then, or a better chance, to do, if you like, the more personal, relational, human work much better. Otherwise, you'll just be chaos.
Absolutely loosey goosey. But also, those KPIs, those one-to-ones, like I help. I started helping people by calling myself a meeting strategist, because I just can't believe how useless meetings are in this day and age. It just is astounding. And
so I've got to give somebody a shout out here,
go on.
because they are brilliant at this. And they give away so much awesome free content. And they're called Carrie Goucher. Look up on LinkedIn, look up Dr. Carrie Goucher.
Can't wait.
And she does a great newsletter. She just gives away so much incredibly valuable content around how to have better meetings.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
She's fantastic. So look her up.
I will. I can't wait. I love hearing things like that. Thanks. And actually, it's like you said before, many managers come in to management and haven't ever had any experience of it. Similarly, I went to one of the best schools. I'm so grateful. Went to a great university. I didn't know how to run a fish and chip shop. Like I wouldn't know how to do anything. You come out with nothing. Like no one is teaching leadership skill. I mean, they are more and more now at schools, but how to self-manage. I don't know if you've read The 8th Habit by Stephen Covey.
I haven't read that. No, I mean, I've done the 7 Habits. Is like,
there's another one, The 8th Habit.
Yeah,
read that
here's one I forgot. Yeah.
I know, I think he's up to 11 habits now. No jokes. But, The 8th Habit's really good. It's a whole book on this one habit, so I can't really distill it into one sentence. Yeah. But one thing he talks about, which, funnily enough, I'm really camping around as something really key that I want to help teams and leaders and businesses do. He quotes Peter Drucker, a management guy, and says the biggest enemy to today is in our leadership space is not technology, it is not disconnection, all the things we might think. He says it's self-management. We simply don't know how to do it. And I can see that all the time. I'm going more and more into businesses where people are overworked, overwhelmed, and don't understand boundaries. They feel like a victim to it. The zero email inbox, is just a drive that is people's own personal KPI of how I'm doing. For them, it's green if it's empty. And how do, but that's it. I get it. Like when we're stressed, we go into hyper focus,
Do
hyperfunction.
you want me to tell you a dreadful story about that? That'll probably
Yeah.
make anybody who's in that mindset
How many have you
just
got?
like pull their hair out. I've stopped counting. So I went to the other extreme. I decided the way to do this is literally just to ignore it.
No, but that's because
So
your personality type would be so happy doing that. Mine would. I'm actually. Do you know what I've done in my past? I just start a new email address when I get overwhelmed.
oh,
with the
that's
old
nice
one.
as well. That's good. I like that. Yeah.
But now I've got a PA, and I just say, "Can you put all of last year's unread ones in a file that I can't see anymore, and just start again?" But no, it's funny how we all function, and how our computers are, the cognitive overload is worse for our brains than marijuana and sleep deprivation. That's what they say.
Yeah.
And it's this is a really big thing in a world where there is so much cognitive overload everywhere. So how we help people self-manage, and just bringing it back round to the values piece. And you said earlier on about leadership, you've got to know where you're leading people to. And I think that's something I'd really love us to kind of land on, really, to think about, because if we don't know where we're leading, it means we're not taking the time to be still in that space. And I talk, I've got some talks that I do in businesses, and one of them is about how to have more energy for the things that matter. And the word energy is actually, I'm going really physics now, but it's mass multiplied by velocity. And so if you think of mass is, how is your mass? Like, how are you? How is your sense of weight right here, right now? Like, as we sit here, to anyone listening, just who are you? Where are you? How are you feeling? Like, people talk about mindfulness. I find mindfulness quite boring, actually, but I do my own version of mindfulness. But what your mass, your weight, and when you can be centered in that, then you have the velocity to move it. Like, where are you moving to with that weight that you've got? And it's marrying them together. But if you have just too much velocity, you won't have any mass. You'll just be pinging all over the place with frenetic energy, and it's not sustainable, and it will burn you out, and it's uncentered. But equally, if you have just mass with no movement, you've gone into shutdown, you're just a big blob that's not actually doing that 1% increase a day that I know Cook talks about. You're just stuck and you're stagnant. So it's marrying the two together. And, that I think is a code of just a frame of mind to think about how we can get energy to lead for the things that matter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's back to that, I call it self-management, self-leadership, whatever you want, and that idea that at least half the battle is your own, is not anybody else's, and so we all know. I mean, and we all see it in other people when they're stressed, when they're overworked, when they're overwhelmed, their leadership goes to pot, and you can sense it. You just need to go into a room with somebody and you can feel that, this isn't going very well. And if we're sensing that of others, then other people are sensing it of us. And so how do we look after ourselves is tough. It's a challenge, isn't it? Because even with the best will of the world, we're never going to do it every day. There's a great one of the expressions of this I think I love is what's the book? I've got it up here on my shelf. 15. What is it? The 15. I can't read. The 15 commitments of conscious leadership. Do you know that?
No, love it.
Oh, you will be all over that, Dolly. I tell you, that is good news for your day. It's fantastic. But they have just this simple question: are you above or below the line?
I know those guys really well. I just haven't read the book.
There you go. Yeah.
Unconscious Leadership. They've got a brilliant website with brilliant things. They talk about the drama triangle as well.
They do. Yeah, absolutely. It's all that. It's all that stuff.
Oh, I haven't read the book. I'll get it. How about, so just say for people listening, go for it.
So just that simple question, are you above or below the line? Just as you sit there, interpret that how you like almost, because you'll know, you'll feel it. And obviously, just above the line is where you want to be. You want to be kind of energized. You want to be curious. You want to be creative. And below the line is where your mass is pulling you down, I guess, in your language. And just that sense of just recognizing it is the first step then to doing something about it. Because once you recognize it, it's like, I think they then have this sense of actually just, you need to shift. And often I think they say, just make a physical shift. Often
100%.
it's just, move
Disrupt
position,
Totally.
have a bit of a shake, go for a walk, whatever it is. And just thinking about, though, are you above or below the line is just a really good question to think, and recognizing yourself when that's the case, and then think, actually, the only person who can do something about that is me. It's not somebody else's job. Nobody else can do that. I'm kind of creator of my own reality. So what can I do to shift to get above the line?
It's so profound. The simplest things always are, aren't
Yeah.
they? Yeah, I love that. As we come into land, James, what is your home item that for you personifies extra in small letters?
So I was saying, and this wasn't just because it happens to be within my line of sight on my desk, honestly. But I've got this plant. I'm going to show you my plant. Can you see my lovely plant there?
Lovely plant.
So this is a Chinese money plant. And actually this comes from a wonderful place called the Glass House. And the Glass House works with women's prisons on horticultural initiatives and plants like this as a business, so that they can fund, and support people into work when they leave prison. But anyway, so this is a lovely plant from the Glass House. And we, during lockdown, when we couldn't meet together in person, for our leadership team, we sent everybody, for an online Zoom, we sent everybody a plant, one of these, just as a kind of, as a nice way to connect, but also connect to something with a good cause, and also something to look after and nurture and grow. And the lovely thing about this, so this must be 3-4 years old now, I guess. Wow. And the wonderful thing is, I think you can see it here, Dolly, little babies coming up, sprouting up. And the wonderful thing about the Chinese money plant is it creates babies, and you just literally pull them out, plop them in another pot, and off they go growing. So I must now have about 5 of these around the house. I must have given away another 5 or 6.
Oh my goodness.
And it's that sense in which, I guess, if you nurture something, it grows, it reproduces, it spreads, and that's got to be a good thing.
Well, I think that's really powerful. I really do. It's a real circle of life story in that.
Oh, there you go. Where's the music? Yeah.
Exactly. No, yeah, there you go. It's true. It's really fun. I have, as a vicar's wife, I've been given many a plant in my time, being told, Dolly, I feel this is like a kind of metaphorical symbol of you, of how God sees you, of how you are. And I go, oh, thanks so much. And they've all died.
Look, well, we'll have to get you a Chinese money plant. I think they're virtually impossible to kill. Genuinely, I mean,
please, I am so bad with plants, but I can bring up children. I've nurtured them, and they are alive. And I've got dogs and puppies.
Phew,
but,
huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I have my plant life, but I love a money plant. Let's give it a go. James, thank you so much for coming on today. I'd love to have you on again, and just brilliant with all your work at Cook. I love being a customer, and just encourage anyone listening, go and get some meals there. They're so yummy. And my kids love them too. So thanks, James.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Oh, James, that was so